Good evening. My name is Odie Hawkins, and tonight is Thursday, and I'm doing Tuesday's show, or Tuesday's reading. Actually, we had a little layoff due to matters beyond our control, but now we're back on the stick. First thing I'd like to do is start off by explaining, once again, that I'm doing readings from columns that I wrote for the African Times newspaper during the 1996-97 year. And I'm making an effort to correlate the columns I was writing with events that are happening today. In some ways and sometimes, in some places, they completely mesh, they interweave, they intersect. Sometimes they don't. So sometimes I hit, sometimes I miss a little bit. But the interesting thing is that they're more often parallel than anything else. Before I start the reading of the column, I'd like to say, give a little shout out to Sky Patrick at the library.
Los Angeles County Library.
Los Angeles County, for having interviewed Uchenna Nwosu of the Seattle Seahawks, linebacker, 26-year-old young man of Nigerian descent, first generation, who has his brains about him. And the interview was very informative. Basically, bottom line, what he got down to was what a wonderful experience it was to go to the library growing up. His parents encouraged it, and he grew to make a habit of it. I don't doubt that has made him a successful football player as well as a successful mind. He has a kind of little quirky sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Let's hope that he serves his time in football, makes grand theft dough, and gets out of there.
Well, one thing that he said that really impressed me, in going to the library and getting his education, he said he saw a lot of talented guys who were very good in football, but they didn't pay attention to their studies. So they lost their opportunity to play football. So bottom line, you stick with the library, stick with the studies, get a tutor or whatever else you need if you want that scholarship to go on to fortune and fame.
The mysterious, mellifluous mystery voice you hear is that belonging to Zola Salena-Hawkins, producer, director, organizer, all-around person. Does that identify you?
I'll come here real quick.
Oh.
This is me.
This is me. Okay, you don't have to kiss me and all that.
Okay, you got it. Home.
I'm glad you did that, because we've had people ask, what voice is that? And I always identify her, but now you see her.
There you go.
She's a wonderful person, and I love her.
And I love you. Okay.
Now, here's what this particular column is about, and I think it'll take a moment or two for you all to see where it is I'm coming from, and this hasn't changed very much. The title of the column is Press Terrorism on Our Children. What's up? Well, our children are being bombarded by the cigarette/drug company cartels, a last-ditch kamikaze profit attack as they retreat to the east, China, and of course, vulnerable Africa. See the nicotine clouds in their wake? Remember when the cigarette executives testified, "Oh no, I didn't know nicotine was addictive. Did you know that nicotine was addictive? Oh no, I didn't know nicotine was addictive." The billboards and magazine ads glamorizing inhalation death have never told us that it is easier to give up heroin and cocaine than it is to stop smoking. Marlene, on her deathbed, an ex-heroin cocaine speed freak with oxygen snakes in her nose, begged for just give me one more cigarette. Blitzkrieged by the fast foods people, why our children are pushed, seduced into eating the worst food on the planet, quickly. The plantation jobs have closed down. There's hardly anything to do but hang out. So what's the need for drive-by feeding? At-risk youth, an official label. Says my grandson, Brian, approaching that step in the ladder himself. At-risk youth, the sign says, an endangered species. Makes me feel like an angry Congolese gorilla daddy when I see how our children are being attacked from so many quarters by so many. Criminalized by the so-called justice system. They know that they're targeted by the dominant society's racist ethics, so they rebel, which is a natural course of action, and they're punished for their actions. One of the methods used to punish and restrain their energy is to get them drunk. Don't give them cake, give them beer. Yes, beer. Beer espionage has a long, foamy history. In modern times, the Boers in South Africa always made certain that the government beer halls and shebeens of Soweto were well stocked. It's much easier to deal with a drunk opponent than a sober enemy. One of the first things the sisters did when the apartheid regime was failing was to close up the beer halls. Our at-risk youths, the next generation, needed to pursue the political, economic, and civil rights we must always fight for, are being played out of the game by the beer bores of America. This is the way it's done. Seduce 40 ounces of malt liquor into the guts of a teenager. They have addicted 21-year-olds buying 3 or 4 times a day, and what do you wind up with? A stupid youngster on the royal road to cirrhosis of the liver and hypoglycemia. I had to look it up too. These malt liquors, we all know their ghetto brand names, also contain low levels of grain alcohol, which cause some witty types to call the stuff liquid crack. 46 ounces, 5 shots of whiskey. That's the equivalent. So clever the ass, with all of the sexual subliminals. Even the bottles tend to be phallic designs, filled with golden liquid. It's a bud thing. Cold coffee. It's a bud thing. You better recognize, with Billy D grinning, is it psychic? And Snoop hawking gin and juice. It's supposed to thicken your Jimmy, but actually the opposite effect is achieved. Talk about chemical castration. Check out the Schlitz bull closely. Ever see a toro with no cojones? What's with that? African-American men and women demonstrate a profound sense of self-hatred by guzzling the 8-ball. When last heard, the English were known as major league players in the slave business. Why would anyone of African descent want to swallow 40 ounces of old English slave master urine? No matter how cheap it is. Currently, it's $1.39 a quart, 6% alcohol. Incredibly, the bottle is shaped like a Middle Passage slave ship. Check it out.
Oh, yeah.
Check it out. Finally, to the elders, we can't warn them of the beer bore conspiracy if we're riding the coat right beside them. Alfred Coach Powell, a football coach, 16 years in Dayton, Ohio, and a concerned citizen, has been on the road for the past 5 years trying to alert us to the beer bag. I told them I could prove Malcolm's words. I had them look on the side of the St. Ides bottles. St. Ides. It read, government warning, number 1. According to the Surgeon General, Women should not drink alcoholic beverages during pregnancy because of the risk of birth defects. Number 2, consumption of alcoholic beverages impairs your ability to drive a car or operate machinery and may cause health problems. Well, I'm not going to suggest that anybody not drink, except for those who are adults and responsible drinkers. The column was addressed to people who prey on our children, and they're, of course, irresponsible because the almighty buck drives them. That's their motivation. But for those of us who have children, who should be able to tell them the difference between right and wrong, what's good and what's bad, I would suggest that you pay attention to the advertising that is sucking your children into places that they will never be able to come out of. I grew up with people like that. We started off sipping Richard's Wild Irish Roll at the corner of the alley, or Thunderbird, or Night Train, or the other thing. I found out later that this stuff was like 40% alcohol in a pint bottle. 3 young men passing it around got a full share of it. I could barely drink it, and I puked more than once. So that was enough for me. But then I came across friends years later. I'm from Chicago. I'm in Chicago on a beautiful summer afternoon, walking around in and out of my old stomping grounds, and I see a guy who had been a very promising middleweight boxer named Bobo. You know, I looked and Bobo was leaning, was asleep. Well, actually he wasn't asleep, he was in a stupor with his back against a tree in Washington Park near the swimming pool. They got a swimming pool there with about 5 or 6 pools. He was against a tree, slumped over. When in his prime, he was about my size, very muscular, hard hitter. Slumped against a tree with a half-empty bottle of Wild Irish Rose sitting beside him. You know, little drool was coming out of the side of his mouth. He looked like he'd been puffed up with an air pump or something. And all I could look, I looked at that it stayed with me for a long time because all I could think about, we all saw the promise in Bobo. He had a wonderful combination, but he couldn't stop drinking the rot gut pluck.
He could have been a great boxer.
He could have been a great boxer.
Wow. Indeed.
But he was, well, there were several like him. I knew, 2 or 3 people. I know 2 dope fiends. One was named Bam, the other was named Baby June. And I'm not going to take all night to tell this little story, but I have to. These guys were 440 men who are so hurtless, and I mean, they could go from one end of the block to the other in a flash, especially if they snatch somebody's purse. And we watched them. Well, they were already heroin addicts when I got to know them, but it had not stopped them from running. I never could figure that out. They were either comatose with heroin, or they were on the move.
Wow.
It was just no in-between place. It was running or stupor. And years later, I think Bam had stepped out of a 3rd store window thinking he was stepping on the porch or something, and the other one had just decayed. So the column was written, well, I guess you could say it was written to propagandize my particular aversion to people being seduced by corporate greed, and to be aware. And having said that,
I would like to say, though, that I do appreciate the fact that when we were in Ghana, you introduced me to club.
well, okay, here's the difference. In a place where a beer is safer to drink than water, and so far as I know, you've never had the urge to drink beer since we
No,
got back.
I've never liked any beer.
Well,
None.
You're one of those people who has been raised in a pure, decent fashion. And that's your business.
Moving right along.
Moving right along. the reference you're making to be about being in Ghana, we were in Ghana, West Africa, and you know, people have a beer at midday because of the humidity, and they, you know, I had a doctor who had a Guinness stout every morning, and he said, you know, I must have a beer.
Okay. Well,
Whether he was addicted, I don't know whether he's addicted to it. Not that didn't enter into the thing because I was treated very professionally and very well. But he thought it was a good thing to quench his thirst. I don't know what's in the beer. I don't know how they make it. I don't think they make it with maybe the kind of
chemicals.
steroidal stuff they put in alcohol here. You know, you notice when you buy a bottle of wine from Trader Joe's, it'll often have sulfites added. If it's a French wine, they've added sulfites in order to make it have it travel better. But then they won't explain what sulfites will do for you in the long run if you have too much of that particular Les Belles Jansons, whatever it is.
Yes, yes. Well,
so, you know, they're little...
Well, I do miss my club, and I do miss our friends.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get back to our friends first and the club second.
That's
Or
a
if it was
good
possible
idea.
to import it, I would definitely have a case of it right here.
Ah, shit.
And on that note, I say to you,
This website, www.OdieHawkins.com.